Greetings, everyone.
Hello.
My name is Barbara Coverson. I am the program manager for Family Strengthening Families.
And I'm Joey Ford, the Family Community Outreach Specialist for Family Strengthening Families.
And it's time for our Parent Talk at Discovery Center podcast. We have a pretty serious topic to talk about today. Joey, Joey did a lot of research, and she said this June is National what, Joey?
PTSD Awareness Month, Post Traumatic Stress Disorder.
Yeah, so we thought that it would be this would be a great opportunity for us to kind of share in that and help raise awareness in this area,
Yes,
because it's doing the research is much needed,
it is.
and so basically what we find out is that um, post traumatic stress disorder is a mental health condition that's brought on by some type of trauma, some type of trauma. And so, we want to kind of raise awareness on that today.
Right. Especially, we work with families, of course, and many times we happen upon families who may be dealing with this. So, what better way to bring it out? Another resource for them to gain information about it, to help our families to know how to help their families. So,
Right, exactly. And if you think about it, trauma is really an emotional response to an intense event, that threatens maybe a person's well-being, their life, or
right.
their or even causes harm. And so sometimes people may I'm just give a few examples maybe of something that maybe could cause lead to PTSD. Um, the loss of a parent suddenly,
Right. Yes.
maybe killed in a car accident, or we have all type of gun violence now, and maybe a parent has been murdered, a family member or something. So it didn't happen, I'm going to say, to that person, but the parent, the other parent, or the child. I think we're going to have our focus be more on today about PTSD with children and how parents help them. So
Right.
if that being the case, Joey, and you've had a sudden, a loss of one of your parents, that's a traumatic event.
It is.
Uh,
And even especially for a child
mm-hmm.
who's still learning and discovering the world that we live in, as well as the family right there at home. So,
Mm-hmm.
developing relationships and trying to understand is such a magnitude of an event that has occurred in their life
Mm-hmm.
can be very, very traumatic. Even just like you said, losing
Mm-hmm.
the loss of a loved one or
Mm-hmm.
things happening within the community.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it may be gun violence or
Mm-hmm.
car accident or trauma or abuse that happened.
Mm-hmm.
Even just watching the news
Mm-hmm.
today. So,
Yes,
and
Joey.
seeing the devastation
Mm-hmm.
um,
Mm-hmm.
of things that are happening, disaster, weather caused, tornadoes, or however,
Mm-hmm.
things like that can be very traumatizing for a child. So,
Yeah, and for adults too,
for
Joy.
adults too.
I mean,
That's true.
I just want to get off the road when they say bad weather. I don't want to travel. Let me hurry up and get to a stationary location. But yeah, so as we look at that in our effort to help raise awareness, Joey, we know that there are some indicators or some things that can affect or have determine the impact of how deep this is,
Yes.
the severity of PTSD. So let's just talk about a few of those things, some of those indicators. I was just thinking one of you kind of started mentioning was age. It can be, depending on the age of the child, and something happens, it could really have a more severe impact on a younger child than maybe an older child.
Exactly.
Yeah, because they don't
Yeah.
really understand. A 3 or 4 year old may not understand that, I no longer have another parent,
Mm-hmm.
or they may not be able to get that, to
Right.
process that in a
Right.
healthy way.
That's true. And and that matters. I
Mhm.
mean, and sometimes we know children are very resilient.
Mhm.
They're very resilient. However, that does not mean that it will not affect them or they don't need an understanding.
Mhm.
An understanding that will, I like to say, last a lifetime.
Right.
Not
Yeah.
just for their age, but something that will help them to navigate to the next stage in their life.
Mhm. Mhm.
So it is very, very important that we understand that there's a factors that involve the age. Young children are more vulnerable, is
Mhm.
one thing. Infants and toddlers
Mhm.
who are young, too young to talk to or
Mhm.
about what happens.
Mhm.
Um, as far as may not retain certain memories,
Mhm.
so we think, or
Yes.
uh, some research may say, or they
Mhm.
do or may not.
Mhm.
These events can be very traumatic events and can affect their well-being
Mhm.
into adulthood.
Mhm.
So that's why I said we need to. It's okay to give understanding or examples or help
Mhm.
talk with the children on a level of something where they can understand that it will last a lifetime.
Right, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And another indicator, that another factor that may contribute to the impact of, of what happens is frequency.
Mm-hmm.
We kind of mentioned, you said something about the news, Joe, and all the stuff that we're seeing on the news.
Mm-hmm.
But, gun violence is really, I saw something early this morning, and it was talking about how it has increased. The statistics on gun violence has really increased. So that's one, the
Mm-hmm.
frequency of a thing. If a child is living in an area where there's a lot of gun violence,
Mm-hmm.
and then you see it on television,
Right.
and then one of your family members or one of your parents, their parents, is gunned down in gun
Mm-hmm.
violence.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's that frequency, that repetition. This is all around me,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and so the world becomes a scary place
Mm-hmm.
for this child.
Right.
Not just a child. Again, we say even for adults. So this frequency
Mm-hmm.
is a can have an impact on
Definitely.
of
I
child having
agree. I
PTSD.
felt that myself, Miss Barbara, with like you said, things happening in areas where within the world you're hearing about it in the news, so you're more wondering about, am I safe where I'm going, and things
Right?
such as
Yeah.
that. So another thing is relationships. Relationships. Children with positive relationships and with healthy caregivers are more likely to recover. Uh, in other words, it's more stable, safe environment setting. And then again, we like to stress that healthy caregiver, meaning they're taking care of themselves as well. So these are things. This is a foundation that is a must or needed in order for that family, that child, or the family of the children to survive and journey through that process that they're going through, this trauma. So,
You mentioned journey through that process. So the coping skills,
mm-hmm,
how well developed are the coping skills of this child? Are they able to process? And I
mm-hmm,
think that's probably why younger children is more severe, because they're not able to cope. They
right,
and as we get older, we develop these a little bit more. They're a little bit more developed, but your coping skills, you know, um, play a role in this.
mm-hmm,
Perception,
mm,
it's not always. This is with PTSD. We have to deal with what the child perceives.
exactly,
You could say you shouldn't be upset about this. And maybe in a perfect world, but the child is.
mm-hmm,
So with PTSD, you have to deal with perception. What is
yes,
the child perceiving out of all of this? And that this traumatic thing has happened. What are they seeing about this? How are they processing that and perceiving it to be? You know. Mm-hmm.
And another one, last but not least, is sensitivity. We know that every child is different. Um, some are naturally or more naturally sensitive to than others,
Mm-hmm.
and so every situation is treated different.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it doesn't mean that someone's situation is greater than the others, but it does have to be looked at and helped in a different way at times. Their way of treatment may be a little different from someone else's. So sensitivity is important, understanding that every child is different
Mm-hmm.
and seeking that help that's going to help them in the way that they need, which to best survive that situation
Mm-hmm.
is very important.
Right. And so, one of the things we looked at, Joey, you want to look at um, what can be done about this. If your child is experiencing
Mm-hmm.
PTSD,
Mm-hmm.
what can be done? And so, of course, we have um, medicine, we have therapy. They can go to therapy, and there's some medications that can help.
Mm-hmm.
So those are some things in the medical field,
Right.
in the medical help field that can be done. As a parent, there's some things you can do to help.
Exactly. There are.
As a parent,
Mm-hmm.
and one of the things you can do as a parent is help your child to feel safe, because if they're experiencing PTSD, they don't feel safe.
Mm-mm. They don't.
Mm-hmm.
They don't feel safe at all. And sometimes it's hard to understand that as parents. So getting a good understanding of what it is your child is dealing with and how you can best help them is another way. And then you'll find the different ways you can help your child feel safe.
Mm-hmm.
The ways words you can use
Mm-hmm.
when talking to your child,
Yeah.
or even encouraging them to open up and speak with you
Mm-hmm.
after they're learning to feel safe
Mm-hmm.
even at home. And that's hard. That's something that
Mm-hmm.
it would be very hard as a parent, I imagine,
Mm-hmm.
to understand why. Well, if my child is with me, if they're in our home, they should feel safe. If
Mm-hmm.
they're not around, whatever cause is, then
Mm-hmm.
they should feel safe. However, another reason why I stress it's best to get a good understanding of what it is you're dealing with in
Mm-hmm.
order to help your child feel safe, because
Mm-hmm.
this situation or this problem is bigger than what most of us would realize sometimes.
Right.
So,
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
and feeling safe
Mm-hmm.
opens the door
Mm-hmm.
to healing.
Exactly. And Joy, just because it may not be or would not have been, the event may not have affected the parent or caused the parent to be
Mm-hmm.
traumatized, it doesn't mean, I'm just thinking about myself. Maybe I had some PTSD, Joy, when I was little. My pet cat was died. It was killed. I knew it was I had my pet cat. I just loved him. Like, it was just like, oh my gosh. And they told me he ran away from home. He did not
Mm.
run away from home. Somebody ran over my pet cat. I heard him when he did it.
Oh
But
my.
and I was traumatized.
Yeah.
Now, to the adults in the situation, that was not anything that like, it was like, you should, he ran away from home. That made it even worse,
Mm-hmm.
because now I know you lying to me. My cat is gone. My best friend, I didn't have anybody. I played with my little kitten,
Mm-hmm.
and so I was traumatized,
I
and
imagine so.
and the people around me just thought, yeah, you'll be okay. Eventually, I did get over it, but I'm still, right now.
You
I don't want
remember
to.
it, and you
I
remember
don't
how
want to
it
have
felt.
pets. I mean, my son he wants to bring home every animal he can, but I won't let him. I'm just like, we don't do. Yeah, because I didn't want to get hooked on another pet like that. So
Yeah.
you don't know how it may affect a child.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't want to minimize their feelings and
Exactly.
their perception of what the problem is. We have to help them deal with that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And what sensitivity? Yeah. Every child is different.
Mm-hmm.
And so, how sensitive the child is, can make a difference in the
Definitely.
impact of the trauma.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So some are just more um, not quite as sensitive as the others, and some just very emotional. So
Mm-hmm.
you got to know your children
Right.
and how they are as an individual, to know the recognize some of the impact that trauma may
Mm-hmm.
have. Yeah.
Yeah, you really do. Um, we have to understand. I like what you just said. Know your children, because when you're knowing them, you can pick up on behaviors that are not so normal that you're used to seeing here. Because there's a little saying that goes that says, parent or traumatized child may require a shift from seeing a bad kid, to seeing a kid who has had bad things happen.
Mm-hmm.
So and that helps, that giving the understanding and leading towards helping open doors or creating an environment for your
Mm-hmm.
child to better heal or deal with that trauma is helpful, when we are understanding and knowing our
Mm-hmm.
children and knowing the behaviors that we know are normal for
Mm-hmm.
them
Mm-hmm.
and those that are not so normal.
Joy, that's very important because if you label a child as bad, they're gonna think that's who I am. They're gonna
Mm-hmm.
start assume, that identity, and so that's why in whatever the situation is, it may not be trauma. It could be bullying, or it could be
Mm-hmm.
whatever. We don't want to say you a bully or you are a victim. We want the child who has been bullied, the child who is bullying, the child who is experiencing trauma of some
Right.
type. So that way we know that this is still a human being. You're a
Mm-hmm.
child, you're a person, you're a human
Exactly.
being. So what has happened to you does not have to define who
Who
you
you are.
are.
Right.
Who you are can now overcome what has happened
Mm-hmm.
to you. And I think that's good when we look at labels. So we want to
Mm-hmm.
make sure we're careful not to label people
Right.
and not to label children. That kind of gets my blood pressure going, Joy. Because I sometimes you hear people, she's just bad. It's a bad just kid.
Yeah.
Do not. That child has a name.
Mm-hmm.
At least use the child's name.
Mm-hmm.
You
Yeah,
know.
and if you don't do what you're just speaking of, you can miss the opportunity or helping this child
Mm-hmm.
to work through some things that
Mm-hmm.
may have caused this child to act this way, or even cause, and it could be trauma from something such as bullying or other things that we mentioned earlier as well that could cause trauma. So it's an array of things. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, getting the understanding, a good understanding of what
Mm-hmm.
you're dealing with, helps a lot.
Right. And I think that's one of the things when you kind of talking about, helps to reassure the child that you are there for them as a parent, as
Mm-hmm.
a caregiver, as a support system, and that together you will get through this thing.
Right.
And then you want to let the child, doctor know that something has happened,
Mm-hmm.
so that together as working with your medical team, that you may need to be referred out to somewhere, a
Mm-hmm.
specialist,
Mm-hmm.
whatever. These people that this is what they do for a living, and they have expertise in this area to help with this situation.
Right.
We don't want it to be looked upon as a negative thing. Um, I'm trying to think of the word I'm looking for, Joy, to stigmatize.
Mm-hmm.
People want to just like mental health is just this stigmatized thing. And look, if you're diabetic, nobody's saying don't go to the doctor and see about your health and get you some insulin and stuff like this,
Mm-hmm.
because there's a stigma to it. No,
Right.
go. So just like that is an illness, this is an illness.
Take care of yourself. Take
Amen.
care of yourself.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yes, take care of yourself. And I like what you said about together.
Mm-hmm.
You need to know that you're not in it alone.
Mm-hmm.
You need to know, and especially when it's a child involved,
Yes.
knowing that they're not alone and that responsible caregiver or parent
Mm-hmm.
is going to help them take care of themselves and get that
Exactly.
help that's
Mm-hmm.
needed.
Mm-hmm. You know, and I think one of the last things it says that you could do is to talk to your child's teacher. This is going to be important because if your children are school age and they're going through PTSD and stuff like this or any type of, it's going to have some, they're going to have some problems at school. The teacher needs to know that so they're not so heavy handed and they can help be a part of the support system to help this child through this.
Right.
The teacher will need to know they're not just acting out or whatever just to be doing that something has occurred.
Right.
And maybe they need to be handled with care. Yeah. So that's one of the things. Some of the things that you could do as a parent to help your child if you know that that's just some of the things that's going on with them.
Right. And it's awareness. It's bringing awareness to that support system who's helping that child in their daily lives. So.
And let's kind of get over to some trauma triggers, Joy.
Oh yes.
Trauma
we need
triggers.
to know about the triggers, definitely.
Your triggers. It says a trigger is some aspect of a traumatic event that occurs repeatedly. It happens again in another situation. So it's a completely different situation from the first one. But now it takes me back to that first thing that happened.
As
The
if it just
original.
happened.
Yeah, the original thing that happened. So now it's like, okay, so if someone was, a parent was killed in an accident or a sibling or something, and so now you in the car and you're almost in an accident. You're not in one. And so, that brings you back to that first one. Okay. Stuff like that.
Right.
So it's a triggering event, and and so we have to recognize these things. And what are some things that could be some triggers with our children, and I was
Well.
looking. It's important if you're going to help your child that you got to be able to identify those.
Right.
Some trauma, you got to be able to see, okay, this is what this is. Recognize it. The child may not, but you got to.
Right.
But as a parent, you
As
want to
a
help
parent,
your child.
Exactly. You want to help them. So, identifying those trauma triggers is very important. When you do better identify those or can better identify those, then you can know how to better deal with the situation at the time. And letting them know that something you're saying or doing, or it may be something harmless and that caused that trigger, and it may not even be harmless to them, of harm to them, but to better understand, identify those triggers is very important. It's important to watch for patterns of behavior and reactions as well from the children. Things that don't fit the situation, and to let them know that it's not the same thing happening at that time. That it's not the situation, that the original situation that they're in. So parents, getting the understanding and identifying those trauma triggers are very important to helping that child in the moment, to help them understand that the situation is over. You're just dealing with something that's occurring that reminding you of it right now. But we're going to work through this. We're going to work through this and just do the steps that it takes to calm that anxiousness that they may have by themselves at that moment. So,
I think you kind of in some ways saying, to just be there for your child, be physically
mm-hmm,
and emotionally available.
mm-hmm,
Sometimes it may not be convenient. It may not be convenient.
yeah,
When your child may be having a breakdown and you just getting ready to go off to work.
mm,
Well, okay, so you might have to call in and say, I'm coming,
mm-hmm,
but I need to address this with your child needs to know during this time that they're important too.
mm-hmm,
And, of course, you don't want to go to work late,
right,
but if the child is having a meltdown, you can't take them off to school in meltdown mode.
exactly.
Yeah.
It just adds to it, makes it
Hmm.
worse,
Yeah.
makes it worse.
It's gonna get worse. The first person to say something to them is gonna get out of control.
Mm-hmm,
So you got to be ready to be emotionally available and physically available if necessary, while we're going through this process of regaining, of the child being able to develop coping skills and be able to regain their footing.
mm-hmm,
You know.
mm-hmm. Another thing we will have to look at or should look at as far as helping our children with these triggers is respond and don't react.
Mm-hmm.
This is something that we come across commonly with our parenting
Mm-hmm.
classes and
Yes.
all. It's
Mm-hmm.
a big thing for everyone to know
Mm-hmm.
in all walks of their lives, but especially when working or dealing with or taking care of
Mm-hmm.
a child or someone in your family
Mm-hmm.
who's dealt with trauma or dealing with trauma.
Yes.
Learn to respond and don't react.
Mm-hmm.
Your actions may trigger um, the person that's dealing with the trauma who is
Mm-hmm.
already overwhelmed.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to be careful and know that, okay, in this moment I had to stop whatever it is, whatever, and deal with what this situation is causing for the person who is feeling overwhelmed right now. In order to not hide the situation, but to calm it,
Mm-hmm.
to
Yeah.
calm it. So when
Mm-hmm.
your child is upset, do what you need to do to keep calm.
Yes.
Lower your voice. You
Mm-hmm.
may acknowledge your child's feelings
Mm-hmm.
and be a reassuring and definitely be honest with
Mm-hmm.
them. These
Mm-hmm.
things are something that will help us when we're trying to respond and not react.
And yes. And you want to avoid physical punishment.
Mm,
You know, if the child is already experiencing trauma, you gonna beat it out of them,
mm-hmm. It's
and
not
they've
gonna work.
already. That may be what has caused the trauma. They maybe have already been beat or bruised,
Mm-hmm.
abused in some type of way.
Mm-hmm.
So this is not the time to be heavy-handed, um,
Right.
but to try other means of bringing about corrective behavior. Um, so because really this is an illness
Mm-hmm.
that you're dealing with. So just think about it. I'm going to go back to the diabetes.
Mm-hmm.
If you had someone that was diabetic, you wouldn't beat them, them back to their blood sugar levels being correct. That's not going to solve the blood
Not
sugar
at
level
all.
problem. No. And so we don't want to do that. We want to make sure that we are um, not taking personally what the child may be saying or doing. Like this is
Mm-hmm.
a direct attack on me as a
Oh
parent.
yes.
I've done the best I can,
Mm-hmm.
and goodness, and here we are. This is not a time to, because it's not personal.
Mm-mm.
It's not meant
Mm-mm.
to. I will say, a lot of times, hurting people do hurt other people, but it's not meant. It's not because of something personal with you as a parent. It's simply that the child has an illness.
Mm-hmm.
If
Exactly.
we could ever separate that, you wouldn't take it personal if a child was diabetic and needed medicine and help. oh, let me take this personal because no, you would just make sure they got the help that they needed, and that's all we're saying as we're seeking to have raise awareness this month. Just make sure that the person in your life gets the help that they need, and if it's you, we're going to talk about you in just a minute. And we come to the end. We're coming up on the end. Um, but make sure that you listen. You know,
Right. Very important. Now, listening, parents, I know this one can be tedious at times, but it's so important and so needed to just listen and not force the child to talk before they're ready, but listen. And it may even, that time to listen may come at a time when you're busy doing something, but that child is opening up,
right.
and you have to stop whatever you're doing to listen. It's important for you to listen and not avoid difficult topics, uncomfortable conversations. You are your child's first and main contact with a lot of things in common in how to conversate or deal with others or situations as well. You may not, myself as a parent, I know when I don't know everything. I know when I need to seek some advice or guidance or assistance where I can get a better understanding. So, listening and being the person that can guide your child through those conversations, correcting any misinformation, because it is easier for them if they can't do it, open up to you and you're the one listening, then they will find someone or somewhere else, and that information may not be the right information. So it's your opportunity to correct any misinformation that that child may have received or gotten, no matter which avenue they may have received it, about that traumatic event. And then too, it's another time for you to reassure them that what happened was not their fault. And who doesn't need to understand that? Especially a child who is trying to understand what they're going through. They need to understand that that traumatic event was not their fault, and that person that they're talking to is listening to them. It helps a lot when you know someone is listening
Let's
to
listen.
you.
I was just thinking, if a child was sexually abused or molested, that's a traumatic event. And especially the younger they are, they don't even know what normal is. And so, but for that child, you're just going to need to have patience, be patient with them, and encourage self esteem, because things like that can have, when we have these traumatic events in our lives, they can sometimes, if untreated or not dealt with, be permanent, leave permanent scars, affect the whole lifespan of a person.
And those
Bec-
attached to them, a domino effect.
yeah. And so we want to make sure that as a parent, we are trying to encourage self esteem in our children. And I always say that one of the things you can do the most, if you can ever just make sure that you get some influence in on your children's life, because that goes a long way.
A
You
long
need to
way.
bond with your children so they will talk to you. They will tell you things. And then that way, before things get too far out of hand, you know what's going on with the child.
Yeah.
Yeah. But before we have to end on today, we did want to kind of talk about the parent, Joy.
Oh, yes.
Because if you're going to be a parent, things are going to happen sometimes in the life of your children. And of course, most parents want the best for their children, and so one of the things that we have to recognize, I do, you do, Joy, is that if we're going to be there for our children, we have to also take care of ourselves.
Right.
And that's not a selfish thing. Now, a selfish thing would be you have not provided for, the lights are off and no food and no water and you getting evicted and then you go and get your hair and nails done. Now, that's selfish. That's not what we're talking
That's
about.
selfish.
We're not talking about go
That
get
is
your hair and nails
selfish.
done and your kids have nothing to eat.
Right. Not that. No, we're not
Make
doing
sure
that.
we get it clear. But we do want, you, in order to be there for others, you might have said this earlier, Joy, you got to take care of yourself.
You do. It's a
Yeah.
must. You have to take care of yourself. Helping yourself is helping your family. Whether that's through that's in many ways. We can be honest. We can help ourselves by being honest about expectations for our child and their relationship with your child. Having realistic expectations about parenting with a history of trauma helps increases the chances for a healthy relationship. So this is one way you can help yourself and in turn help your family as well. So another thing is to celebrate those small victories.
Yeah.
Celebrate those small victories. Take note of the improvements of your child that your child has made as well.
And I think when we're talking about another thing would be don't take your child's difficulties personally. We mentioned it just a little bit, but sometimes what happens, if your child has experienced some trauma, okay, let's just go on and say it. You have too, because this is what we call secondary trauma. Because no one wants to see their child suffering. No one wants to
No.
see, most parents, don't want to see their children hurt in any type of way.
Right.
And so then now, this is why we call this secondary trauma, because I'm affected by what has happened to my child. Sometimes parents may even have guilty feelings like, how did I let this happen? I let this happen. You know, those are some things as a parent we gotta just move from that point and get over it and now be the
Right.
best that we can be for the situation right now.
Exactly.
Dwelling, with all that stuff and beating yourself up,
Yeah.
that's not gonna
And
help the
except,
situation.
yeah, because there are some questions you may ask yourself that you may never get the answer to.
Never.
But if you're spending more time and energy on that, you're not helping the situation as a whole either. So
I shared
gotta
that.
help
I
yourself.
shared that with someone not too long ago, Joy. You may never get the answer to this question. You got to be okay with that. Because at the end of the day, you can't control other people, only yourself, and what you're wanting from that other person.
Exactly.
You may never get the answer for
You
that.
may never get it.
And so now to take care of my children, I have to be able to do a better job of taking care of myself so I can show up and be in the moment with my
Exactly.
child. And I was just thinking, sometimes you may be working and tired and whatever, but you got to have some balance in your life because you're going to have to be able to be there for those moments when your children need you the most. And you don't get back those moments.
Right.
And children don't stay children forever.
That's so true.
One day they'll be 30 and 40, and then you have missed all their childhood. And and so you want to make sure you take advantage of those. And this one says, focus on your own healing. I think that's some of what we're trying to say.
I think so too.
Focus on your own healing too. You're gonna need to do what it's gonna take so that you can be in a better place to be able to reassure your child, to encourage your child, and to help your child through this coping process and this healing process.
Miss Barbara, definitely true. And your children can feel whenever you're not settled.
Mm-hmm.
They can tell. Our children can tell.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we focus on our own healing and taking care of ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
our children are watching.
Mm-hmm.
They're learning by watching us deal with these situations as well. So,
Mm-hmm.
and that's helping them.
Yeah.
That's helping them.
Mm-hmm.
And don't not seek support.
Mm-hmm.
Support is very important for
Very
you
important.
and your family. Is another way to help take care of yourself and your family.
Mm-hmm.
Seeking support, support for your circle. It may be friends and family, professional support.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely, that's who you need to seek for with anything involving trauma and PTSD, especially. If it's another part of it and to better know. But don't be afraid to ask about resources.
Mm-hmm.
Don't be afraid to seek out assistance or help, but understanding what ways can better help you and your family.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I don't want to sound like I'm ending here, but
Yeah.
I want to give you more room to
That's
finish
okay, Joe. We're
because
good.
when talking about seeking support,
Mm-hmm.
I think about what we offer here
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
with Family Strengthening Families.
Yes.
So, parent cafes,
Mm-hmm.
act raising safe kids,
Yes. Mm-hmm.
anger management.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
There's so much. So,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I mean, yeah, one thing we have to recognize is that resources are available. Is that are you willing to take advantage of those resources?
being open.
Mm-hmm. And not allowing something that you may say is a stigma to keep you from getting the help and assistance that you need for your family and for yourself.
Exactly.
You know, you're right. We provide so many different services here at Discovery Center, and they're free. Isn't that a good price?
I know.
They're free. You know, it's funded through grants, and so we're thankful for those grants that we receive to provide these services. But you have to be willing to. I think
Be open.
the old people said you can take a horse to the water, but you can't make him drink. Yeah, or something like that. You know, old people had
I used to
saying.
not understand that, but now I understand now that I'm older.
Yeah, and so we have plenty of things that we
Yeah.
can do here to help. And what we usually find out, like Joy with the Parent Cafe, which is similar to a support group, is that people have similar situations going on. And so when they come together, they say, when you're in a trauma situation, it's like, this is only happening to me. Like, why is this happening to me? But when you get around other people, you find, oh, this happened to you too.
Not alone.
I'm not alone. That's it, Joy. That's what they say.
Not alone.
I'm not alone.
Right.
Yeah. So we are just trying to do what we can to help raise awareness of post-traumatic stress disorder. And of course, if you would like have any additional information, you can give us a call here at the Discovery Center at 662-615-0033, 662-615-0033, and we will be happy to provide any type of assistance that we can, or refer you to other sources if necessary.
Yes.
We network with so many other different organizations, and so we if you have it, just want to talk. If you just need, just want to come and you need somebody to just listen. Joy and I, we're here.
Yes, we're here. That's what we do.
Joy is really good at it. Joy is really good at it.
I try.
I'm just gonna say, she is so good at it. But did you have anything else before we leave on today?
I don't have anything else. I think we said a good bit today and given a lot of helpful information. And I like what you said. If you have any more information for us as well, contact us.
Yeah. So thanks for joining us today on Parent Talk at Discovery Center Podcast. And until next time, have a good one. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.